The Night Court ASMR. Hello, darling, and welcome to the Night Court. As always, it's your choice, and you have chosen an end-of-day meditation appropriate for dawn, when another chapter is beginning. Dawn invites us to set intentions, feel encouragement, and heed the wisdom of our own experience, as well as those who inspire us as we stride into the coming day. And as you already know about me, I very much enjoy listening, reading, and meditating upon Stoic philosophy. So before we begin, take a moment to prepare your space and yourself to attend the night court. Ensure you will be undisturbed and unrequired to do anything but listen, engage, and enjoy for the duration of this experience, because this session is designed to induce blissful, deep relaxation. Don't listen while driving, operating machinery, or otherwise completing a task that requires your careful attention. Although if you can manage to drive and listen to this at the same time, you're a better human than I. Or perhaps I'm not doing my job as an ASMR artist. Either way, I hope it is useful to you. And if you're in a position to do so, turn down the lights, or slowly turn them up if it's morning time for you. Sit or lie back in a comfortable position. Ensure that your neck, back, and legs are supported. Now, notice how your attention to these details is already creating a sense of ease. And as your shoulders relax and your jaw unclenches, perhaps your eyes close, your ears open, and you become attuned to each small sound, perhaps already visualizing the dark, star-flecked sky overhead or behind me. Imagine the glow of a city on the horizon, the cool mountain wind whispering, and the dark embrace of the night, or the sweet beauty of dawn. Now, there's been a lot going on in the world, which is always true, perhaps. At the moment, I think it's especially true in the US, although, of course, that is not the only place where there's upheaval or confusion. So I just thought now would be a nice time to do another video about Stoic philosophy. And today I'm going to read some of the thoughts of Marcus Aurelius. I've got a few tags here. But this will be a pretty casual reading. I have some thoughts I wanted to get to, but also we can just flip around in the book. I just love to flip around in the book. I love the way it sounds. Now, Marcus Aurelius, the thing about meditations is that he actually wrote this. It's his journal, which I think is just really amazing. And I don't imagine anyone would, for instance, want to publish one of my journals long years after my death. I don't imagine they would find nearly as much wisdom. So it's interesting to read through this because there is so much incredible self-awareness, so much useful guidance from a Stoic perspective. But then also, he never intended it to be published. So I think it's interesting to see kind of the level of candor. But also, occasionally, there will be passages that are just not something you'd necessarily want to guide people by. There'll just be a chapter about not wanting to get out of bed, or a passage rather, which is really humanizing, of course. And Marcus Aurelius was, by all accounts, a human, an amazing human. I also read Ryan Holiday, who's a contemporary author who talks a lot about Stoic philosophy. That's kind of his whole deal. And he was interviewing someone named Mike Duncan, who wrote a book recently. And there was a particular quote in that conversation, and it's really just a composite of Stoic thoughts. It's not attributed to one individual, but I thought I would just open with it. The winds may howl, but I will not be swept away. The winds may howl, but I will not be swept away. You know, which really to me is all about doing good, being good, continuing to live by the standards one has set for oneself, despite all of the turmoil around. Now, Marcus Aurelius, I've already mentioned that Meditations was his journal, essentially, from what I understand. And he was an emperor of Rome. And just as a fun fact to sort of use as maybe a bit of a guidepost as we're talking about these times, if you've ever seen Gladiator, which was a great movie, obviously they've taken plenty of creative license, which is fine. I haven't seen part 2 out yet, though, but as far as the first one, Commodus, who's played by Joaquin Phoenix, who's the new emperor, he was the son of Marcus Aurelius in reality. And so you'll see time periods and different people and elements kind of mixed up to create that story, of course, which is fine, you know, it's historical fiction. But I just thought it would be interesting to give you a bit of a bookmark about who his son was. Very different, and by all means, I think the depiction in the film of that character of Commodus is fairly accurate based on other things I've read. He was not beloved, and I just bring that up too because the passage I'm going to read, where I just give you a bit more background of Marcus Aurelius and some of the philosophical background of his thoughts, mentions his son. And it seems the apple did fall far from the tree in this case. The composition of the Meditations is normally dated to the 170s, Marcus's last decade. That this was a dark and stressful period for him can hardly be doubted. In the 10 years between 169 and 179, he had to cope with constant fighting on the frontier, the abortive revolt of Cassius, and the deaths of his colleague Versus, his wife Faustina, and others. These are the reasons why that quote in the beginning I thought was also very appropriate. The winds may howl, and certainly they were for him. Though he could hardly have anticipated the center of turmoil that would follow his death, he may have suspected that his son and successor Commodus was not the man he hoped. That in these circumstances Marcus should have sought consolation in philosophy is only natural. But understanding what Marcus looked for from his philosophical studies requires a certain amount of orientation. To understand the Meditations in context, we must familiarize ourselves not only with Stoicism, the philosophical system that underlies the work, but also with the role of philosophy in ancient life more generally. Today, philosophy is an academic discipline, one that few people other than professional philosophers would consider central to their everyday existence. While we may think of ourselves as having a philosophy of life, it bears little relation to what goes on in the philosophy departments of our universities. The careers of 20th century analytic philosophy often seem remote from what the American philosopher Thomas Nagel terms mortal questions. The problems involved in making ethical choices, constructing a just society, responding to suffering and loss, and coming to terms with the prospect of death. Indeed, most of us would be inclined to see those issues as the province of religion rather than philosophy. For Marcus and his contemporaries, though, the situation was very different. Ancient philosophy certainly had its academic side. Athens and other large cities had publicly financed chairs of philosophy. And professional philosophers taught, argued, and wrote as they do today, but philosophy also had a more practical dimension. It was not merely a subject to write or argue about, but one that was expected to provide a design for living. So I think this is fascinating because I agree with the authors writing the foreword here. We don't really consider it to be part of our daily lives, but as it can and perhaps should provide a framework for the way that we, orient ourselves to the world and go about our lives, can be so useful and practical. And in fact, one of the reasons I'm sharing thoughts of Stoicism with you here is that because I find it eminently practical. Now I'll get to reading some quotes. I like to give context, but you can always, of course, skip it. When I listen to ASMR, I do just want to hear whispers and rambles. So I think it's funny when creators say, okay, now it's time for the video to start. Because it starts from moment one, relaxing me. I hope that you don't mind my technique in that respect. Of course, you can't always skip around if you're just waiting for the words of wisdom. I do like some tapping. Here we go. Nature is pliable, obedient, and the logos that governs it has no reason to do evil. It knows no evil, does none, and causes harm to nothing. It dictates all beginnings and all endings. Just that you do the right thing, the rest doesn't matter. Cold or warm, tired or well rested, despised or honored, dying or busy with other assignments, because dying too is one of our assignments in life. There's well to do what needs doing. Look inward. Don't let the true nature or value of anything elude you. Before long, all existing things will be transformed to rise like smoke, assuming all things become one or be dispersed in fragments. The Logos knows where it stands and what it has to do and what it has to work with. Now, again, this is a journal, so not every thought is complete. He'll just sort of list ideas that he has, and often they come in a thematically sensible way, like I think these have. He's talking about nature being essentially indifferent, not cruel, but just allowing things to unfold as they may. And all we have to do for our part is the right thing. It's a bit like Gandalf, Oh gosh, now I'm just going well off topic here, but it reminds me of when he says, all that we have to do is decide what to do with the time that is given to us. We all know that quote, and there's more to it, of course, but all we can do is decide how to behave in dark times. We can't necessarily change the times, at least not with any one unilateral push, right? It takes everyone best revenge is not to be like that. And I think here he's speaking of others upon whom you might want vengeance. The best revenge indeed is to not be like them. The mind is that which is roused and directed by itself. It makes of itself what it chooses. It makes what it chooses of its own experience. Everything is brought about by nature, not by anything beyond it or within it, or apart from it. I really believe that. I've often said nothing occurs outside of nature, and so therefore I don't believe in the supernatural, only that things might be preternatural, meaning they've yet been unexplained, or they've not yet been explained. Those are my thoughts that I tagged on there, not Marcus Aurelius's, but I can't help commenting. Everything is brought about by nature, not by anything beyond it, or within it, or apart from it. When jarred unavoidably by circumstances, revert at once to yourself, and don't lose the rhythm more than you can help. You'll have a better grasp of the harmony if you keep on going back to it. Pride is a matter of deception. When you think you're occupied in the weightiest business, that's when he has you in his spell. I'm going to read that last one again. Pride in this sentence being the he, to which he refers. Pride is a master of deception. When you think you're occupied in the weightiest business, that's when he has you in his spell. So be careful to think that what you're doing is of the utmost importance to everyone else. Some things are rushing into existence, others out of it. Some of what now exists is already gone. Change and flux constantly remake the world, just as the incessant progression of time remakes eternity. We find ourselves in a river. Which of the things around us should we value when none of them can offer a firm foothold? Like an attachment to a sparrow, we glimpse it, and it's gone. And life itself, like the decoction of blood, the drawing in of air. We expel the power of breathing. We drew in at birth just yesterday or the day before, breathing it out like the air we exhale at each moment. What is it in ourselves that we should prize? Not just transpiration, even plants do that. Or respiration, even beasts and wild animals breathe. Or being struck by passing thoughts. Or jerked like a puppet by your own impulses. Or moving in herds. Or eating and relieving yourself afterwards. Then what is to be prized? An audience clapping? No. No more than the clacking of their tongues, which is all that public praise amounts to. A clacking of tongues. So, we throw out other people's recognition. What's left for us to prize? I think it's this. To do and not do, what we were designed for. That's the goal of all trades, all arts, and what each of them aims at. That the thing they create should do what it was designed to do. The nurseryman who cares for the vines, the horse trainer, the dog breeder, this is what they aim at. And teaching and education, what else are they trying to accomplish? So that's what we should prize. Hold on to that, and you won't be tempted to aim at anything else. And if you can't stop prizing a lot of other things, then you'll never be free, independent, and imperturbable, because you'll always be envious and jealous, afraid that people might come and take it all away from you, plotting against those who have them, those things you prize. People who need those things are bound to be a mess and bound to take out their frustrations on the gods, whereas to respect your own mind, to prize it, will leave you satisfied with your own self, well integrated into your community, and in tune with the gods as well, embracing what they allot you and what they ordain. I'm going to read some of that again. So, if we throw out other people's recognition, what's left for us to prize? I think it's this: to do and not do what we were designed for. And if you can't stop prizing a lot of other things, then you'll never be free, independent, imperturbable. I think much of that is quite self-explanatory and a beautiful thought. We may all have different opinions, I think, about what purpose is or what that thing we're designed for is. But what better project, at least in my view, than to spend your life in part seeking that thing, and once you find it, to focus on doing it, to feel satisfied through that, and thus be more free of the concerns of others. The way people behave. Some people. The way people behave. They refuse to admire their contemporaries, the people whose lives they share. No, but to be admired by posterity, people they've never met and never will. That's what they set their hearts on. You might as well be upset at not being a hero to your great-grandfather. Oh, this is one of my favorite thoughts. I read somewhere, and I don't remember the attribution. I don't want to guess because I don't want to be wrong, but it's something like, I'd rather be, and this isn't a Stoic thought per se, but it's something I think of when I read this, a contemporary thought. I would rather be a good ancestor. No, I'm sorry, wait, let me think again. I would rather be a good ancestor than descendant. And that's a part of what he's talking about here. There's a lot in this quote, but you know, the way people behave, the way many of us behave, I think we're all guilty of this sometimes. You know, refusing to admire our contemporaries, the people whose lives, you know, we share, but instead admire a celebrity or someone not even necessarily in our daily lives at all, someone we don't know, someone admired, as he says, by posterity in some cases, someone you'll never even meet. And then some of us set our hearts on that, you know, and use that as some sort of template for what it is to be worthwhile, you know, what are the qualities that comprise a worthwhile life, and someone that we should aspire to be like, and so on. But you might as well be upset at not being a hero to your great-grandfather. I love the humor in this, but, maybe we should pay more attention and to take heart from the people doing good things in our actual lives, right? Rather than people we may never meet. Anyway, there's a lot there, but I just love that. You might as well be upset at not being a hero to your great-grandfather. Next one, very good too. Not to assume it's impossible because you find it hard, but to recognize that if it's humanly possible, you can do it too. This is actually one that I feel very strongly about. I've been watching, just for example, ASMR for years, and eventually I just had this thought, as I have had about many things in my life now to date, that, well, if someone else can do it, like if anyone can do it, then so can I, right? And it took me a long time to find the sort of guts to start my channel, but I think about this a lot, and there are so many people I admire doing this, and that I think are so great at it and who've helped me so much, And this thought, not to assume it's impossible because you find it hard, but to recognize that if it's humanly possible, you can do it too. I mean, what can we not do if we keep that in mind, right? It's a beautiful thought. Tapping into our next passage. Alexander the Great and his mule driver both died, and the same thing happened to both. They were absorbed alike into the life force of the world, or dissolved alike into atoms. So often as I read these, I think of other quotes. I mentioned Gandalf earlier, but I suppose it doesn't echo, but in fact Shakespeare instead echoes this thought when he talks about how, the kings and peasants all end up as worm food. We all end up in the same place. Death, the end of sense perception, of being controlled by our emotions, of mental activity, of enslavement to our bodies. I like that definition. Disgraceful for the soul to give up when the body is still going strong. Take heart. If someone asked you how to write your name, would you clench your teeth and spit out the letters one by one? If he lost his temper, would you lose yours as well? Or would you just spell out the individual letters? Remember, your responsibilities can be broken down into individual parts as well. Concentrate on those and finish the job methodically without getting stirred up or meeting anger with anger. What practical advice, though, take things bit by bit instead of being overwhelmed by a larger task or idea of task. Awaken. Return to yourself, now no longer asleep, knowing they were only dreams, clear-headed again. Treat everything around you as a dream. I am composed of a body and a soul. Things that happen to the body are meaningless and cannot discriminate among them. Nothing has meaning to my mind except its own actions, which are within its own control, and it's only the immediate ones that matter. Its past and future actions, too, are meaningless. It's normal to feel pain in your hands and feet if you are using your feet as feet and your hands as hands. And for a human being to feel stress is normal if he's living a normal human life. And if it's normal, how can it be bad? Now, I don't think that he's talking about allowing your life to be full of stress, and being in pain and treating that as nothing, or, not trying to improve the thing causing you stress or the thing causing you pain. But this thought, and if it's normal, how can it be bad? Again, there's another Shakespeare quote. Nothing is good or bad, but thinking makes it so. And I think there are a lot of really similar Stoic thoughts to that one. If it's normal, how can it be bad? If we keep assigning bad to things, well, that's our thinking, right? Our opinions about them that make them bad. So if we start to look at more of the difficulties in our life as a matter of course of being human, because no one can actually avoid them. No one, rich or poor, can avoid difficulties and pain and stress. And I'm not at all trying to minimize the trials that some people go through. There are people that go through really horrifying things, right? But isn't it better if in a situation like that, to try to compel your thoughts to get you through the traumatic event, the difficulty, than to try to compel the world around you to change your frame of mind? Have you noticed how professionals will meet the man on the street halfway, but without compromising the logos of their trade? Should we as humans feel less responsibility to our logos than builders or pharmacists do, a logos we share with the divine? Now, I don't want to make you feel as though you're in a class or anything, but I do think, because I've used the word several times now, that it bears defining a little bit more specifically. So often, Marcus Aurelius and other Stoics will use the word logos, and I'll just try to give you a little bit of a definition of that. So, the goal of a Stoic thinker is to understand the universal principle that acts according to reason, or logos. So we could say logos and reason are a bit synonymous. The major takeaway here: all the things that happen in nature ultimately can be understood and made sense of within the context of nature. A few minutes ago I gave you another quote of Marcus Aurelius that I expanded on probably too much, but the idea that nothing occurs outside of nature. So being able to understand, make sense of things, and recognize we share that with one another. There is such a thing as a shared logos. And so you might, when you hear the word if, it makes a sentence confusing, consider that as part of the definition. I've got a bit of hair in my mouth. If that helps at all, to sort of make sense of where I'm going with things. Anyway. The things ordained for you. Teach yourself to be at one with those, and the people who share them with you. Treat them with love, with real love. Implements, tools, equipment, if they do what they were designed for, then they work, even if the person who designed them is miles away. But with naturally occurring things, the force that designed them is present within them and remains there, which is why we owe it special reverence. With the recognition that if you live and act as it dictates, then everything in you is intelligently ordered, just as everything in the world is. What a powerful thought, to feel connected to nature in such a way. And to remember that we are connected to it. Something to be revered within it. The people they want to ingratiate themselves with and the results and the things they do in the process. How quickly it will all be erased by time. How much has been erased already. No one can keep you from living as your nature requires. Nothing can happen to you that is not required by nature. I think those are quite comforting thoughts. You cannot quench understanding unless you put out the insights that compose it. But you can rekindle those at will, like glowing coals. I can control my thoughts as necessary. Then how can I be troubled? What is outside my mind means nothing to it. Absorb that lesson and your feet stand firm. You can return to life, look at things as you did before, and life returns. Focus on what is said when you speak and on what results from each action. Know what the one aims at and what the other means. Don't be ashamed to need help. Like a soldier storming a wall, you have a mission to accomplish. And if you've been wounded and you need a comrade to pull you up, so what? What a beautiful thought. I think increasingly, and I personally have struggled with this, we've become a world of sort of hyper-independent, hyper-self-reliant people. I know I've really done some things I've made harder on myself than they needed to be because of that sense of utter self-reliance, right? If you need someone to help you carry a refrigerator home, or you need to put it on wheels, do that, and the people that love you, let them help you. This is a lesson I'm continually learning because I tend to have a repulsion against doing it. But it actually is pleasurable for those people who care about you to help you, Forget the future. When and if it comes, you'll have the same resources to draw on, the same logos. Be in the present, right? When the problems occur in the future, you won't have made yourself a better person to meet them by worrying constantly about them. Those are my thoughts, by the way. All substance is soon absorbed into nature. All that animates it, soon restored to the logos. All trace of them, both soon covered over by time. To a being with logos, an unnatural action is one that conflicts with the logos. Let it happen, if it wants, to whatever it can happen to. And what's affected can complain about it if it wants. It doesn't hurt me unless I interpret its happening as harmful to me. I can choose not to. No matter what anyone says or does, my task is to be good. Like gold or emerald or purple repeating to itself. No matter what anyone says or does, my task is to be emerald. My color is undiminished. I'm going to read that again. I love it so much. It's one of my favorites. It almost makes me emotional somehow. But I can't think of a better way of keeping yourself on the right path. No matter what anyone says or does, my task is to be good. Like gold or emerald or purple repeating to itself. no matter what anyone says or does, my task is to be emerald, my color undiminished. I'm going to put that bookmark back in it. Let's do a bit of tapping. Oh, I just love the sound of paper. Get a pen in here for notes. I'm actually going to underline that last quote. You know what else I love in ASMR? When someone writes in a notebook very close to the microphone. Maybe we'll do a video of that another time soon. Where are my other bookmarks? When people injure you, ask yourself what good or harm they thought would come of it. If you understand this, you'll feel sympathy rather than outrage or anger. Your sense of good and evil may be the same as theirs or near it, in which case you have to excuse them. Or your sense of good and evil may differ from theirs, in which case they're misguided and deserve your compassion. Is that so hard? You know, I think this is one of the most difficult lessons. You know, you hear that phrase, hurt people, hurt people. And I think there's something to that. Now, it doesn't mean that the people who deliberately hurt us, the people who cause us lifelong trauma, necessarily need to be forgiven. And I'm not saying I don't believe there are any offenses that don't, so I'll state again, I think there are offenses which may be unforgivable. But what he's talking about here is, just questioning first before responding with anger, whether the harm was intentional. And then you also consider what the other person's been through. Because we're all just sort of acting out of our own pain, aren't we? Which we all have. And sometimes responding in the present moment to past events, because we've been programmed by those instances. I could go on about that for a long time, but I'm going to read this again because I just think it's so vital. And in fact, I do prefer to live in a world where I can be compassionate toward those that hurt me. Or at least be able to let go of some of that pain that hangs on in me, hating them, wishing them ill, all of that. How could that not be better? That has to be better. For me, for my body, for my spirit, for my mind. Then the alternative. When people injure you, ask yourself what good or harm they thought would come of it. If you understand that, you'll feel sympathy rather than outrage or anger. Your sense of good and evil may be the same as theirs or near it, in which case you have to excuse them. Or your sense of good and evil may differ from theirs, in which case they're misguided and deserve your compassion. Is that so hard? Treat what you don't have as non-existent. Look at what you have, the things you value most, and think of how much you'd crave them if you didn't have them. But be careful. Don't feel such satisfaction that you start to overvalue them, that it would upset you to lose them. Wow. This is really helpful for envy, especially envy of material things. Discard your misperceptions. Stop being jerked like a puppet. Limit yourself to the present. Understand what happens to you, to others. Analyze what exists. Break it all down, material and cause. Anticipate your final hours, other people's mistakes. Leave them to their makers. Oh, I strive to really just do that last. I think we all should. Usually, and especially in cases where someone doesn't even know you harbor ill will toward them, even if they did something to genuinely cause it in you. You were the one holding on to that. You're the one suffering from it, not the person who doesn't even know you're angry at them. So, focus on the now. On pain. Unendurable pain brings its own end with it. Chronic pain is always endurable. The intelligence maintains serenity. By cutting itself off from the body, the mind remains undiminished, and the parts of that pain affects, let them speak for themselves if you can. I don't say these are easy lessons. Disgraceful. Remember, this is his journal, so sometimes he'll just have a thought and sort of carry on with an incomplete sentence. Disgraceful that the mind should control the faith, should be able to shape and mold it as it pleases, but not shape and mold itself. Whew. And why should we feel anger at the world, as if the world would notice? That's perfect. Kind of goes to what I was saying before, right? Sometimes we harbor these bitter little resentments, and we're all guilty of it sometimes, I think. And the world is indifferent to it. But we're going around holding on to these judgments and being less happy. For what, Who cares? Why should we feel anger at the world as if the world would notice? I love about Stoicism that we are all so insignificant. That's very satisfying to me. It doesn't make me feel less as an individual person. It's just a good reminder that, I don't need to hold on to my pains and sorrows and let them become regrets and recriminations. I hope you enjoyed listening to this. I enjoyed reading it. I mean, I could just read this entire thing, really, over and over and have. And sometimes different things will stand out to you, depending on what you're going through. I'm just going to read my favorite one again. And then say good night or good day. No matter what anyone says or does, my task is to be good. Like gold or emerald or purple repeating to itself. No matter what anyone says or does, my task is to be emerald. My color undiminished. Now, let the dark embrace the night enfold you, or the coming dawn awaken you. Thank you for sharing